Um, in his book, in Chabrol's book, he tells a story about you being put in jail at an early age by your father or whatever, and he seems to think it's very significant to your whole development. Do you think so? Do you think it has any particular significance?
It could be. The actual occasion was when I suppose I must have been at the age of 5 when I was sent along with a note to the chief of police, who read the note, then promptly put me into a cell and locked the door.
And you hadn't read the
For
note?
5 minutes. No, I hadn't read the note. And
for 5 minutes?
Yes, and then said, that's what we do to naughty little boys, you see. Now, what effect that had on me at the time, I can't remember. But, you know, they always say psychiatrically, if you can discover the origins of this or that, it releases everything. I don't think it released me from a natural fear of police.
Yeah, but you always had. But you chronicled that kind of feeling of a person being, you know, in the wrong man.
Oh, I felt the front part of the wrong man, I felt very much.
Yeah.
I was very aware. Not so latterly. I've often thought of a scene of a man, especially in the English sense, being taken to jail in what they used to call the Black Maria. And to be able to see out of the grill window at the back probably all the things that people were doing around, say, 6 o'clock in the evening, going into restaurants, going home, lining up to go into a theater. And this man's on his way to jail for probably 10, 15 years. And I've always felt that was a kind of last glimpse of ordinary life, you know, everyday life.
What influence do you think that the Jesuit schooling you had has had on your work, if any?
I think the Jesuit was organization, you know, control, and to some degree analysis, I suppose. The education is very strict, you see, so orderliness is one of the things that comes out of that, I suppose. Although, strangely enough, one's orderliness is, with me, spasmodic.
Really?
Yes. In this sense, I always remember when I was at the age of about 18 or 19, I was a senior estimator at an electrical engineering firm. And the requests for estimates used to come in from various corporations and so forth. And I was kind of lazy. I used to pile them up on my desk, and I got to a big pile. And suddenly I used to say, well, I better get down to this. And then, by goodness, I polished them off like anything. And used to get praise for the prodigious amount of work I had done in that particular day. And that praise was lasted until the complaints began to come in about the delay in answering, you know. And I think that that's the way I feel about one's working, you know. Certain writers one works with want to work every hour of the day, you know. They're very facile. I'm not that way, you know. I want to say, oh, let's lay off now for several hours. Let's play. And then we get down to it again, you see. And that's, now whether I'm sure the Jesuits didn't do that, except if they...
Well, that might be a reaction against the...
It could be. I think it could be. But
also, what about in any religious sense? Do you think it's had any influence on you?
At the time, I think fear, but I've grown out of religious fear now. I think I have. I don't... I don't think that the religion side of the Jesuit education impressed itself so much upon me as the strict discipline that one endured at the time.
You told me you had no intention of becoming a film director when you.
No, I hadn't. It was quite a surprise to me. Balkan, you know, you heard of Sir Michael Balkan.
Yeah.
He was the one, and I think I want you, when you write the thing, you must make a specific point that Balkan is really the man responsible for Hitchcock, basically, because,
really?
Oh yes, at the time, I had been a writer, a script writer, and on every picture I used to write the script. And then at the end of that job, I turned over and became art director and production designer, or whatever it was in those days. And then I did that for several pictures until one day he said the director, I worked with the same director all the time, didn't want me anymore. And now what the reason was, some political reason. And it was then, you know, that Balkan said, how would you like to become a director? Apparently, Balkan obviously was in a spot with the director. If the director said he didn't want me, well, that was that. But Balkan obviously felt that one's talent existed and had not changed. And it was he who suggested that I become a director.
Had you just intended to go on doing...
Oh, I was very content for the time, yes.
Writing scripts and designing?
Yes, I enjoyed it very much.
You told me also that all your film training was with American movie people. And,
yes, entirely.
And how did they differ from the British, I mean, in your mind?
I don't know, because you see, the strange thing was that I gravitated from the American film training into a position where I was with a new company. So I didn't have to move into an existing company who had certain rules and certain organizational patterns and so forth. I never experienced that, you see. So I really was fortunate in that sense because I was quite, as a young man, as an art director, I was quite dogmatic. I mean, I would build the set and say, here's where it's shot from. And I would tell the director where it's...
Oh, well, then you had the instinct right away.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Well, you made a big point about the American training, because you must feel that it's superior to the British. That's what I really
It was at the time, very definitely. And in fact, I always remember the London Daily Express review of this first big picture that I'd worked upon, where I had written the script and done the art direction.
It's Woman to Woman.
Woman to Woman. And the headline in the Daily Express was, Best American Picture Made in England. Now, of course, you know, the director directed, he was an exhibitor, you know, but I was the, and my wife was the editor.
Oh, she was the film editor?
She was the film editor and scripter. They used to combine both jobs.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, in those days, the script clerk was really the cutter on the set, watching out for the cutting elements and the matching elements.
What you call now continuity. Is that
well, today a script clerk is a clerk. I mean, it looks out for matching. That's about all she does. The rest is all bookkeeping, you see.
What was number 13 about, the film that you started?
Well, that was I was sort of
how did you get involved with
talked into that by the publicity woman of the American company, famous players Lasky, who you know, began to see something in me even before I got to writing or art direction, when I was just a young man around the editorial department of the famous players. Her name was Elsie Codd, and she had worked with Chaplin, you know, and of course in those days, if you said, well, I worked with Chaplin, you thought they knew everything, you know. So she wrote this comedy thing.
He was that big then already?
Huh?
He was so...
Oh, yes, sure. This is 1921. And so she wrote this comedy, and we...
Oh, it was a comedy?
Yeah, tried to put it together. It wasn't very good. Well, it never saw the light of day.
Yeah. But Claire Greet was involved with that.
Yeah, Claire Greet was involved, yes.
Of the 5 pictures you worked on before you directed your first picture, was any of them what might now be called a Hitchcock picture?
No.
No,
none at all.
Do you consider The Pleasure Garden or Mountain Eagle significant to your
No, Pleasure
development
Garden,
or...
again, you see, there was the American influence. When, after I went to Munich to make the Pleasure Garden, when Balkan came out to see it, he was the producer, and I made it in Munich, and he came over from London. Of course, hadn't seen any of the rushes or anything.
Oh, he wasn't there while you were shooting?
No, no, no. And no, I left London with a script under my arm and came back with 5 tins of film in my baggage, or 6 cans, whatever it was. And but he came out to Munich to see the first cut, and his first remark was, well, it doesn't look like a continental picture. It looks like an American picture. Because the cameraman had worked with American directors, although he was an Italian, and was very conscious of American technique.
Was Ventimiglia?
Ventimiglia, yes.
I see. But they weren't, neither of the first two pictures were in any way, I mean, they weren't first of all, they weren't thrillers.
Melodramas, I would say. Melodramas,
but romantic,
yes.
They were more...
Yes, yes. I think the headline, again in the London Daily Express, by a different man, a reporter, it wasn't even a film critic, had seen this film, The Pleasure Garden. It was headed, Young Man with a Master Mind.
That's very nice.
That was the first picture, as a result of the first picture.
And both scripts were really assignments. I mean, you didn't have anything to do with choosing them. Right?
No, no.
Do you agree that The Lodger is it's the first of your films that can properly be called a Hitchcock film? I mean,
really, yeah.
In The Lodger, did you want the audience to believe without doubt that Novella was the murderer?
This condition, of course, is one of the commercial drawbacks one encountered. Of course, strictly speaking, he should have been the Ripper and gone on his way. That's how Mrs. Lowndes, Belloc Lowndes, wrote the book. But of course, having Ivor Novello, the matinee idol of the period, he had to be cleaned up. Just as I had to do it with Cary Grant in Suspicion many, many years later. So obviously, putting that kind of actor into those sort of films is a mistake, because you just have to compromise.
So in other words, the audience immediately knows he couldn't be.
Yes, sure.
I see. But also that change, you know, although I didn't know that, what you just told me. I mean, I've read that somewhere that the novel was different, but I didn't know it. But the film is kind of fascinating because he isn't the killer. I mean, it becomes even kind of more fascinating.
Well, in the film, the nearest one had to create some excuse for his strange behavior, and he was a neurotic brother of one of the girl victims.
Yes, I know, and I saw the picture just before I came up. But it also made the public, you know, the crowds, the masses, and everybody except the girl.
Yes.
Rather unsympathetic. I mean, here they were very quick to assume that he was guilty.
Oh,
it became
sure.
very interesting that way.
Yes, yes.
Well, here's the same question now. I said, I've heard criticism that the ending of The Lodger was compromised, which is what you just said.
Sure it was.
But
compromised by really basically miscasting.
By miscasting.
Sure.
But I felt that when I saw it now, that the point of the picture, as you finally had to make it, was that he was unjustly suspected.
Yes.
Did you feel that? I mean, was that what you wanted to convey? Or?
Oh, well, naturally, that's the resolution of the thing, sure.
The girl in The Lodger thinks Novello trusts him. And now this is a funny question, because she trusts him without any question. I mean, she never distrusts him. In contrast to the heroines in, say, Suspicion or Shadow of a Doubt or even 39 Steps. And it seems to me that your progressions, you've gotten a little bit more bitter about women like that since that time. Am I right or wrong?
Not necessarily so, you know, it's just a... So can I have more tea? That looks awful pale.
Why don't you give him mine?
Do you like it as pale as that?
I don't really care.
Well, I can certainly make more. I have more.
Does mine look better to you?
You know, put some more tea. You can, that's all milk. Put some more tea in there. I don't know that, I think that in the case of the Lodger, maybe the girl had an instinct that he was all right, you know. But of course, in those days, of course, of silent pictures, we weren't able to develop character very deeply. You know, there were sort of symbols, there were ciphers, the figures on the screen in those days.
The neon sign in the picture and several other brilliant things in it seem slightly reminiscent of the German school of the period. Were you consciously influenced by
Very much so.
Very much.
Well, you see, you have to remember that a year before I was working on the Ufer lot.
Of course.
And I worked there for many months. And I was working on the Ufer lot at the same time as Jannings was making The Last Laugh.
With Murnau, yeah.
With Murnau, and I was able to absorb a lot of the methods and styles.
And Lang must have been there at the same time.
Lang, I didn't encounter Lang so much. Murnau I did, Jannings, of course, and Robeson.
So that was very
and
conscious.
Gruner, Carl Gruner, who made that film called The Street.
I never saw it.
A very famous film in its day.
Really?
Yeah.
How did you get the idea for that marvelous shot of him walking and then
The glass. Well,
how did you do it, as a matter of fact?
I did it with. I had a floor made of 1-inch thick plate glass. About 6 feet square.
That's marvelous.
Well, there you see, there was the visual substitution for sound.
Yeah.
You see.
Perfect.
Just as much as I had the whole set built for when the lodger went out late at night, almost to the ceiling of the studio, showing 4 flights of stairs and a handrail.
Yeah, and you see his hand
Just
go.
a hand going down.
Yeah.
You see, that was, today, of course, that was from the point of view of the mother listening.
Yeah.
We would substitute sound for that, although I think that the handrail shot would be worthy of today.
Yeah.
In addition to sound.
To sound, yeah. Yeah. Were you, at the time, were you thinking about the possibilities of sound? I mean, of its
No,
coming in? Was there
not
any?
at all.
There was no inclination?
Not in those days. No, there wasn't.
To go back a minute, you said in that trailer, on that speech you made, that Psycho was the most cinematic
One of the most cinematic,
since
yes,
the
since
Lodger.
Lodger, that's
You really
right.
think that? You think that?
Well, only for
I mean,
this
interesting
reason.
that you made the comparison.
Well, I was thinking in terms of almost the style of the picture, and the use of the cinema, of the visual only.
Visual only. I see.
You
What
see,
you
that's what I meant. You
The
see.
Lodger, when we screened it at home, was astounding how fresh and modern it seemed.
It's strange, isn't
Really,
it?
because
Yeah.
I remember we were with you that evening.
Mhm.
We didn't screen it that night, but the next night, and you had said that evening, well, it must look awful today, you know, and it looked. The print was a lousy print,
Yeah, sure,
but it was astounding. I mean, the technique very fresh and not at all dated.
Well, that was all the first 10 minutes of setting up the Jack the Ripper, you know.
Oh, it was marvelous. And you know, Polly hates silent movies. She can't bear them. And she said, well, this is the first silent movie I've ever enjoyed. You know, and I like certain silent films,
Yes,
but I had to agree
sure.
that it was very. It
Yes.
seemed like a talkie.
Yes.
You know,
yes,
that kind
yes.
of. And that's now you said that was achieved because it was almost a substitution for sound. Yet you weren't really thinking about.
No, I wasn't.
How to.
No.
You know, it
No.
was just a matter of conveying a thought visually.
Conveying, yes, visually.
Because there aren't very many titles in the picture.
No, no. You see, Psycho, of course, relies entirely upon the visual for its telling. And the other pattern very clearly was the creation of imagery entirely to set up the audience, set up their mood. And as the film went on, you only had to hint at the visual because you'd filled them up with so much apprehension and fear at the beginning that as the film went on, boy, we had them working like hell, you see. That was the...
Working very, very much.
Sure, so I wasn't relying on words to do it, you see.